Is this new standalone bill that Chuck Schumer is bringing to the floor something that can pass? Does it have the votes?
Well, I think it can pass. We don't know whether it has the votes, Joe. We're going to have to put it on the floor, and the Senate is going to work its will. This is one of those moments in American history when we literally can't predict the vote. And at least in my view, this is one of the most consequential votes every member of the Senate is going to take, because the future of Western democracy, I think, depends on it. The Ukrainian people have fought bravely for the last 2 years. They have shocked the world in what they've been able to do against Putin's illegal invasion of their country. They've taken back half the territory. They've fought battle after battle after battle. It's been extraordinary. And now the question falls to our country whether we're going to support them in that battle, whether we're going to join the European nations who recognize the threat that Putin is to them, and whether we're going to acknowledge the important role the United States has to provide in leadership. I hope the answer, Joe and Kailey, is not just that we will support this, but that there will be a very large vote in the Senate so we can send a message to the House of Representatives that we're out of time, that this is a moment when America's resolve is being tested by tyrants, and that America has to show once-in-a-lifetime leadership here.
But the Speaker of the House, Senator, has been warned that if he puts anything that would give more aid to Ukraine on the floor, he would face a motion to vacate. Given everything you just said, the importance you think there is of getting this aid through, would you encourage your colleagues, Democratic colleagues in the House, to offer to protect the Speaker to make this happen?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't give advice to the House members. I can tell you that I certainly believe that somebody who is able to put together a bipartisan vote that continued to allow the funding for Ukraine should be worthy of being the Speaker of the House. That's my view. I mean, I have been holding up budgets around here. I've been holding up everything I can hold up around here when we've been passing things that have not included the Ukraine aid. I think this is a moment when people are, look, there's not a reason for us to be here, any of us to be here, if we can't get this aid passed. And that's how I believe it. And I don't know whether the Speaker is going to see it the same way. I hope he does.
Well, we actually heard earlier today from Florida Senator Rick Scott about the other half of this, Senator. I'm assuming you'd still like to see a deal on the border. It sounds like a lot of Democrats would, maybe more than Republicans in your chamber at this point. Here's what the senator from Florida had to say. We'll have you respond.
Why don't we go back and secure the border with the existing law? I mean, we have a lawless president. It doesn't matter what bill we pass. He's not going to enforce it. So why doesn't, Joe Biden do his job?
What's your view on that, Senator? Because that's become the refrain the last couple of weeks with a lot of Republican lawmakers who say we don't actually need a bill. The president can do it all on his own.
I know, Joe. Listen, man, this was a bill about Ukraine and a bill about Israel and a bill about Taiwan. That's what this bill was about. The Republicans in the Senate said we will not pass a bill unless you guys do something serious about the border. Because obviously the implication of that was we had to pass a law in order to do something serious about the border. And I think what shocked them was that Joe Biden came a very long way in that negotiation, urged, among other people, by me. I have stood up over and over again. I said, I thought the Biden administration was wrong to lift Title 42. I've brought to their attention over and over that I felt that our border was broken. And we got to a bipartisan agreement, and then they walked away. I mean, the American people are going to have to make their own assessment about this. But just to connect your observation and Kailey's observation about the Speaker, I was part of the Gang of Eight who wrote the comprehensive immigration bill in 2013. It got 68 votes in the Senate. It went over to the House. It died. John Boehner, a guy I have a lot of respect for, who was the Republican Speaker at the time, said the worst mistake he ever made as Speaker was not putting that bill on the floor and letting the House work its will. So the point is, sometimes things are more important than a politician's job. Sometimes the American people have a real expectation that's more than that just we're going to point fingers. But there were actually, when we say we're going to solve something on the border, we're going to solve something on the border. And we're going to say we're going to help protect democracy for our kids and for our grandkids and provide American leadership that they actually mean it and that we actually believe it. This is one of those moments, I think.
Well, we'll see if this indeed does reach the House floor. There's other legislation that already not only reached the floor, but actually passed with a major bipartisan majority in the House. This bipartisan tax deal that in part would expand the child tax credit. What is the fate of that legislation going to be in the Senate? Can it pass without serious amending?
It got a massive vote in the House. And it should pass in the Senate. I don't think it needs to be amended. I think it's a good piece of legislation. I ran a virtually completely unnoticed campaign for president on the idea that we could cut childhood poverty in this country by half by increasing the child tax credit. And while it doesn't go as far as I would want, it makes substantial progress. And as you said, it's bipartisan, which that has to be a relief to the American people. I hope we get a big bipartisan vote in the Senate on Ukraine. I really do. It would be good for our standing in the world.
Senator Bennet, there's been another airstrike. This just something we've learned about in the past hour or so. You've probably known about it for longer from your perch on the Intelligence Committee.
Yeah.
The U.S. conducted an airstrike that killed the commander of an Iran-backed militia in Iraq is where this happened. Central Command has confirmed this, saying that this person, not named, was responsible for directly planning and participating in attacks on U.S. forces in the region. What else do you know about it? What are you hearing?
Well, what I know is we should expect more and more and more out of this, out of Iran and their proxies. And it's going to be and it's going to be very important for us to act in a way that deters the Iranians and makes and make sure that this dispute, this war that is happening between Israel and Gaza and Hamas is not something that's going to spill out into the broader region. And every single day, Iran's proxies are testing us and testing us and testing us, and they need to know that we are going to respond to that and that we are paying attention to what they're doing. So this is not something that you can deter in one day or even 1 week, or I would say even 1 month. We have to be vigilant about this day after day after day, and I think that's what you're seeing today.
Well, but as you see these proxy groups continuing to conduct attacks in the Red Sea and against U.S. forces, is there any real sign that things are improving, that deterrence efforts are even starting to work, even if they haven't worked entirely? What does the intelligence suggest?
I would not say things are improving. I'd say this is a very dangerous moment in the Middle East. I'd say that the Iranians' proxies are trying to decide how to gain the most advantage in this war as they can. And as I said, we're going to have to be vigilant. And in my view, we've got to get to a place where we can begin to figure out how to have a negotiation about a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinian people that can begin to create some order in this part of the world. That's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but I think that the United States of America can't take our eye off that goal. And in the meantime, we've got to make sure that we don't allow this to escalate into a wider war.
If these strikes continue, if these attacks continue and the tit for tat goes on without seeing improvement here, Senator, would you support strikes directly against Iran?
Well, I wouldn't. I don't want to state any hypothetical. What I would say to you is that I expect that this will continue, that Iran and their proxies will continue to test us and continue to test us, and we're going to have to make a judgment. The president's going to have to make a judgment every single day about what the correct deterrence is and how to push back. That's an assessment that they literally have to make every day, every hour, every day. That's what we're going to continue to have to do.